This episode of Marijuana Today Daily is brought to you by MJ Today Media. Publishers of this podcast, our weekly flagship show, Marijuana Today, as well as the weekly shows Weed Wonks and Green Rush, which you can find over at weedwonks.com and greenrushpodcast.net. If you have a legal marijuana business, brand, or service that you want to introduce to the best audience in the industry, then you need to be spending some of your marketing budget with us. Get in touch with me today to learn how. Just email me at shay@mjtodaymedia.com with Shay spelled S-H-E-A. Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Thursday, May 21st, 2020, and you're tuned in to episode 940 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. Louisiana kicks off today's headlines as 3 different proposed marijuana reform bills were advanced yesterday in the state's legislature. One of the bills is one we've covered here recently that would free up Louisiana doctors to recommend medical cannabis to patients for any condition they deem fit, rather than from a list of prescribed conditions. That bill, HB 819, has already passed out of the House and was approved yesterday by the Senate's Health and Wellness Committee. A bill that protects banks from being penalized for working with marijuana businesses was passed by the entire House, though that one is mostly symbolic as the major impediment to marijuana banking lies at the federal level. And lastly, a resolution was passed by the House Labor and Industrial Relations Committee calling on the state to create a task force to study the, quote, workforce demands and the skills necessary to supply the cannabis industry with a capable and competent workforce, including physicians, nurse practitioners, nurses, and other healthcare practitioners, unquote. Pop over to Marijuana Moment for all the details here. We turn to my hometown of Portland, Maine for our second top story, as the Portland City Council just voted 8-1 in favor of a proposal to issue 20 legal adult use marijuana retail licenses, to be given out using a point system that gives applicants different values for hitting different categories, like already being a medical marijuana caregiver, having experience running a regulated business, and being a member of an impacted community. This is a top story today, not because it's my hometown, but more because Maine's marijuana regulators recently said they were waiting for more towns and cities to implement adult use licensing before making the system live statewide. So this is a big chunk of potential space that just got licensed up. Let's hope we're getting close to the tipping point of allowing adult use sales in Maine just 4 years after voters approved it. Bringing home today's final top stories is Deborah Burchard over at Green Market Report, who details a pretty stellar set of financial results just issued by Florida-based cannabis operator Trulieve, which saw its revenue jump 21% sequentially for the first quarter ending March 31st to land at $96 million. More impressive is the adjusted EBITDA of $49.4 million and the net income of $14 million. That's profit. Deborah's piece over at Green Market Report has all the details and is worth the read, if only for the nice warm feeling of reading about profits. Swing on over. Those are our top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz it in headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, MJ Today Media, publishers of this podcast, our weekly show Marijuana Today, as well as the Weed Wonks and Green Rush podcasts, which can be found over at weedwonks.com and greenrushpodcast.net. MJ Today Media has built up a nice little podcast network with tens of thousands of industry listeners. When it comes to legal cannabis marketing, there's no more effective way to spend a dollar than with us. We will put you in the ears of all the right people. Our listeners are engaged and they make decisions. We can work with budgets of all sizes, so it doesn't matter if you're the smallest startup or the largest public company. We have ad inventory for everyone. Zip me an email to shay@mjtodaymedia.com to learn how to get on our advertising calendar. That's shay@mjtodaymedia.com with Shay spelled S-H-E-A. All right, time for the blitz. Deborah Borchardt over at Green Market Report is back with another, this time with the just-announced bankruptcy filing by Green Growth Brands. The company filed up in Canada, where it's incorporated and where it will go through court proceedings. Deborah has lots of good coverage on this, which I encourage you to read in full. Green Growth Brands got lots of coverage in the industry over the last year or so, with bold announcements of plans to roll out a chain of CBD outlets in malls all over the country. The company was also rather loud about the large number of former high-level retail executives it hired as it signed deals with companies like DSW Shoes. There's lots of good lessons to be learned here. Give this storyline some time. U.S. Virgin Islands Governor Albert Bryan Jr. just released an updated version of a proposed bill he's pushing in the U.S. territory to legalize adult-use marijuana. Governor Bryan rolled out the first draft of his bill back in December, but it was voted down, so he went back to the drafting board and made some changes, including the removal of home grow for non-medical patients, as well as a requirement that anyone who wants to use cannabis legally obtain a permit to do so. Vibe High has all the important details and points here. Swing on over that way if this one grabs your attention. New Cannabis Ventures has the latest quarterly financial results from multi-state cannabis operator Harvest Health, based in Arizona, which pulled in total revenue of $45 million for the first quarter of the year, up 19% sequentially and 134% annually. That sits atop a net loss of $20 million and an adjusted EBITDA loss of $3.9 million. Another one you can read in full if Harvest Health is on your radar. As always, we have all the news we cover linked to on our website at mjtodaydaily.com. Kyle Yeager over Marijuana Moments has a wonky story up about a confusing storyline that sprung up this week centered around an announcement made on Tuesday by the U.S. Department of Agriculture over the eligibility of hemp farmers to participate in coronavirus relief programs. On Tuesday, the USDA said in a posting that hemp farmers specifically did not qualify, though it was more tied to the fact that the market price of hemp hasn't dropped at least 5%, rather than any bias against hemp. The language did, though, specifically call out hemp along with tobacco as two commodities that would not receive any kind of price review. But just hours later, the agency edited the language to make it less restrictive on hemp. So it appears that hemp cultivators are still barred from coronavirus relief, but at least they have the ability to press for change should hemp prices fall. If you do business in hemp, you should probably read this story. Zach Harris and Mary Jane has a good roundup of various incidences that have taken place all over the country of police using the coronavirus pandemic to harass and target people for having cannabis. Police get bored too, and when they do, the people usually suffer. Some people way more than others. So this is another good story to read in full. The Jamaican Cannabis Licensing Authority just changed up rules over how medical marijuana in that island nation can access cannabis, creating so-called herb houses where registered patients can now pick up curbside orders. And finally for today, yesterday in Minnesota, voters in the tribal Red Lake Nation approved a ballot measure legalizing medical marijuana, making it the first tribal nation to do so in the state. This one is all the more remarkable for the fact that the Red Lake Nation's medical cannabis program will be the only one in Minnesota where patients can consume flower. The Minnesota State Medical Marijuana Program only allows for the use of tinctures, oils, topicals, and pills. You can read more on this at Tanner Barris' story on Minnesota Cannabis College. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again tomorrow morning with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, MJ Today Media, and to our awesome patron listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the patron listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Shay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in and starting your day with Marijuana Today. Today.
One take, Shay. One take.